From sightings to attacks and all the strange stories of sea creatures caught in the night, here is part 2 of the top 10 terrifying shark sightings that could be the Megalodon. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Zuiyo-Maru Monster. This story is one that comes to us from 1977, and rather than an alive animal sighting, this one is actually this carcass that was found that we still aren't quite sure what it belongs to. The Zuiyo-Maru carcass was one that was found by Japanese fishermen near New Zealand. Because it was so unique, it was taken to be analyzed, and while many have speculated that it was a basking shark, that has never been confirmed or proven. Considering the fact that it was definitely shark-like, but just not quite clear as to what exactly it was, is definitely interesting. In our number 9 spot today, we have the sea creature. Back in both 1817 as well as 1819, there was a sea creature that visited the coast of Massachusetts, and it was seen by hundreds of people, but no one has been able to identify what it could have been for sure. The creature was said to be around 3 feet in diameter and around 50 feet long, and it is said that it moved similarly to how a whale or a dolphin might. The first sighting of this creature was when some fishermen spotted it, but the real panic began as the creature started to show itself closer to shore. To this day, some people swear that this was some sort of real sea monster, and others believe it was just a case of mass hysteria. What do you think? In our number 8 spot today, we have the Prehistoric Monster. Back in 1959, a fisherman named Tex Geddes and his friend James Gavin were boating somewhere just off of the coast of Scotland. It is said that during their time out to sea, they encountered a sea monster that neither of them had seen before. They described its head as being sort of turtle-shaped, and that it was a, quote, hellish monster of prehistoric times, and said that it was breathing heavily through a, quote, large red gash of a mouth. Okay, not exactly a kind description, but definitely a bit of a terrifying one. I think it's important to bring up that we don't actually know what megalodons looked like. We have a sort of idea, but at the end of the day, we only have fossils, jaws, and spines, and that doesn't leave us that much to work with. While it isn't quite clear what these two men saw for sure, and it's likely that we'll never know, whatever it was definitely wasn't just your average sea creature. In our number 7 spot today, we have Dr. Gru. When we think of the tales of sea monsters and myths, we often think of the many serpent-like creatures that just may be lurking underneath the water. This is definitely a common theme, and in the 17th century there was a botanist who came up with a sort of explanation for these sea serpent sightings. It's important to note that this botanist was a very legitimate scientist who really worked to change basically everything we knew about plant anatomy, so when he came forth with this evidence and explanation, it rightfully caught people's attention. Basically, he had this specimen, which was a sample of skin that he said was from some sort of seal, but that it had a neck just as long as the rest of its body. Of course, this would explain a whole bunch of sea monster sightings, but in the end, the skin sample ended up completely disappearing, making any confirmation of the story or the animal's existence completely impossible. I know a megalodon isn't necessarily supposed to look like a seal with a long neck, but who's to say for sure that it doesn't? In our number 6 spot today, we have the Shipwreck. Back in 1909, the French steamer La Seine was out to sea when it collided with the British India steamer the Onda. A shipwreck is never good, but this one was particularly bad as, in heavy fog, the French ship sank in just 2 minutes. This of course left people stranded in the water, and I mean, you can probably see where this is going. In the aftermath of this wreck, while waiting for the rescue, there were 101 people who lost their lives from shark attacks. That's a lot of people. That is either a lot of sharks or a very few large ones. I mean, none of us were there, so it's hard to say for sure, but whatever really happened here, it's an absolutely horrifying tragedy. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Kayak Encounter. Ida Parker and Kristen Orr were kayaking off of the coast of Plymouth in 2014 when they encountered a shark. This is truly a nightmare scenario, and it must have been absolutely terrifying. The pair, however, had actually set off with the intention of seeing a great white shark, and while it's likely that this is exactly what they encountered, they definitely did not expect what happened next. The two had heard of rumblings of a shark in the area that had swallowed a seal in one gulp, and this is what sparked their desire to head out on this journey. While out there, however, the shark began to attack their kayaks. In the end, both of them made it out alive, and when their kayaks were recovered, one was found with a huge bite mark in it. In our number 4 spot today, we have the oldest shark attack. Considering the fact that the Megalodon is said to have been extinct somewhere over 2 million years ago, even evidence that seems ancient to us is a lot more recent than what our current understanding of their timeline here on Earth would suggest. arrest. That is exactly why the discovery of what is speculated to be the world's oldest evidence of a shark attack is very interesting. This discovery came by way of a 3,000-year-old human skeleton that is marked with different gashes and puncture wounds. It is said that because of the volume of wounds, it makes it slightly easier to tell the story of what happened. This is because while researchers first believed that perhaps the wounds were caused by metal weapons, this could not explain why there were so many in certain parts of the body. Another telltale sign is how this skeleton was discovered in Japan, which at the time of this person's life, there weren't really any metal weapons at that point in history in Japan, which ruled out this theory entirely. They were also able to rule out other terrestrial carnivores, and that's when they turned to marine life to look for some more answers. Because of the time it's been, we obviously don't know what creature was involved in this attack for sure, but with the mass amount of wounds found on the skeleton, it was likely to be something large and terrifying. In our number 3 spot today we have snorkeling. Robert Pamperin and a friend, Gerald Lair, were snorkeling off of La Jolla Cave in California in 1959 when Robert was attacked by a shark. It is said to have all happened quite quickly, and Gerald was alerted to the distress when he heard Robert scream. Gerald turned and saw Robert unusually high in the water and his mask was missing. At this point, Gerald dove under, and this is when he realized exactly what was going on. There was a shark that had Robert in its mouth up to his waist. Unfortunately, there was not much Gerald could do to stand up to this absolutely massive shark that he described as larger than your average great white. Robert sadly did not survive the event, and by the time rescuers arrived, they were only able to locate one of his fins. In our number 2 spot today we have the Jersey Shore. Back in 1916, during the summer season, there were 5 different shark attacks that occurred over the span of 10 days that ended up in the deaths of 4 people. This wasn't something that had been seen before in the area, which of course left people speculating as to why. There was a heat wave in the area during the time, which likely led to more people being out enjoying summertime sort of activities, and maybe this attracted the shark, but in the end no one knows for sure because no one even knows what kind of shark is responsible for the attacks in the first place. Luckily, this didn't go on to become a continuous trend, and whatever shark this was went on its merry way, or perhaps found another food source or whatever, but this series of attacks definitely kept the public on edge for the weeks and months surrounding. In our number 1 spot today we have the USS Indianapolis. This is a story that has been considered the worst shark attack in history, which is definitely a horrific thing to think about. In 1945, the USS Indianapolis was an unescorted US warship that was sailing in the Pacific when it was struck by a Japanese torpedo. This had no problem tearing the ship in two, which meant that 900 sailors were now floating in the ocean waiting for rescue. Over the next 5 days, nearly 600 men lost their lives due to shark attacks. I said this about the other one that was similar to this, and I'll say it again. That's either a group of sharks or a very few large, very hungry ones. From the survivors' accounts of what happened over the course of those days, it seemed like an absolutely nightmare situation. This is exactly why this has gone on to be called one of the worst shark attacks in history. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thank you so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you next time. Bye!